Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, we drift into a story where time itself doesn't always tick forward, and soft mysteries whisper in the quiet corners of the magical world. A story not of grand battles or powerful spells, but of gentle wonder, hidden gears, and a clock that quietly counted something no one else could see. Lost Time. In a tucked-away corridor of Hogwarts, far from the bustling Great Hall and high above the spiraling astronomy tower, there is a little-used classroom. Few students pass by its thick wooden door, and fewer still know what lies behind it. The torches lining the hallway burn low and warm here, casting golden halos against age-worn stone. The air is tinged with the faint scent of parchment and dust, and something else, something delicate like forgotten dreams. It's a quiet hour at the castle. Outside, snow falls gently over the forbidden forest, blanketing the trees in soft white. Inside, Hogwarts glows from within, candlelight flickering behind tall windows, portraits dozing in their frames, and fireplaces humming with gentle crackles in the common rooms. The usual footsteps and laughter of the day have faded now, replaced by the occasional sleepy whisper or the creak of a book spine opening in some distant library alcove. And in that little room, half shrouded in shadows, stands an old clock. It doesn't chime on the hour like others. It doesn't have numbers or hands. It simply hums, softly, as if breathing. And sometimes, when the castle is especially still, the gears inside shift on their own. Backward, just a little. This is where our story begins. But before we open that quiet wooden door and step closer to the clock's secret, make sure you're warm and comfortable. Let your blanket feel like a protective spell wrapped around you. Let your breathing slow. And if you find your eyelids growing heavy as we go on, that's quite all right. This journey is meant to carry you softly, gently, like a floating charm through a dream. If you enjoy these magical sleep tales, feel free to follow our journey, explore more gentle stories, or simply share a quiet moment with us each evening. Every tale is its own little world, always here for you when you need peace. And now, let's walk the long, candlelit hallway, past portraits that murmur in their sleep, to that forgotten door, the door with a curious aura, the one that hasn't been opened in years. Listen carefully. Can you hear it? The faint hum, the turning gear, the clock that doesn't quite belong. Let's find out what it's been counting, together. Her name was Luna Lovegood, and she had always listened to things most people couldn't hear. While most students rushed through the corridors of Hogwarts in pursuit of spells, potions, and lessons, Luna often paused to notice the quiet spaces between sounds. She'd stop to observe a floating dust mote dancing in a sunbeam, or to watch the way candlelight flickered differently when it passed by a sleeping portrait. She wasn't in a hurry. Luna never was. It was her 6th year now, and though many still thought her odd, her mismatched earrings, the dreamy look in her eyes, the way she spoke as if in conversation with things unseen, those who knew her well had grown to understand. Luna noticed magic where others simply passed it by. Her world was full of warmth and gentle oddities. Her favorite socks had little golden moons stitched into them. Her wand, always polished, rested behind her ear like a quill when she wasn't using it. And in her satchel, nestled between textbooks and strange pebbles she'd found near the lake, was a small notebook labeled "Things That Feel Like They're Waiting." Luna had made it for herself. In it, she wrote down all the places in Hogwarts that seemed just a little bit aware. Not haunted, she wasn't afraid of ghosts, but places that held a kind of stillness, as if they were remembering something. And lately, her list had grown. One particular afternoon, as the snow whispered against the windows, she mentioned it to Neville Longbottom. They had just left the greenhouse and his cheeks were still red from the cold. "Do you ever feel like certain rooms are watching?" she asked, tilting her head. Neville blinked. Watching? You mean like Peeves hiding?" "No," she smiled gently. "More like waiting. Some places feel like they're waiting for something or someone." Neville thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I think I know what you mean. There's a staircase that always creaks when I'm nervous. Only when I'm nervous, though, not anyone else." Luna beamed at him. Exactly. Their friendship had blossomed over years of shared quiet. While others teased or dismissed her, Neville had always listened, not just politely, but truly listened. And in return, Luna offered him a sense of calm he rarely found elsewhere. With her, the world didn't demand anything. It simply was. Now, they often explored the castle together, especially during those serene moments just after dinner when the torches burned lower and the walls seemed to breathe old secrets. It was during one of these twilight wanderings that they found it. A door half hidden behind a tapestry etched with runes neither could read. A door that didn't appear on any map, not even the Marauder's map, which Neville had borrowed from Ginny for the weekend. And yet, Luna felt certain. "I think it's been waiting for us," she whispered, fingertips brushing the wood. Neville glanced at her, then back at the door. His heart thudded once, softly. "Let's find out," he said. And so, the mystery began. The hour grew later, and soft rain began to patter against the high windows of the Gryffindor common room, setting a peaceful rhythm that echoed faintly within the warm stone walls. The fire was burning low now, just glowing embers flickering with a golden breath that seemed to match the gentle rise and fall of sleepy thoughts. Harry sat nestled into the corner of the couch, legs pulled up, arms resting on his knees. The Marauder's map lay open across his lap, its ink glowing faintly, like fireflies just before they vanish. For some time, he had watched the little dots dance across the parchment, students moving along corridors, Filch pacing around the trophy room again, and Peeves drifting erratically through the stairwells. It was all so predictable, comforting even. Hermione had long gone up to bed, mumbling something about needing her rest for arithmancy. Ron had yawned and followed a few minutes later, muttering half-heartedly about being too tired to watch for mischief. Yet Harry stayed. Maybe it was the way the wind whistled faintly in the chimney, or the quiet hum of unseen magic that always buzzed at the edge of perception in Hogwarts. Maybe it was just a hunch, but something told him tonight wasn't quite ordinary. As the last page of the map fluttered softly in the fire's breeze, Harry leaned forward. His eyes scanned the area around the third floor corridor, the one long abandoned since the Philosopher's Stone had been removed. It had no reason to be used anymore. But tonight, there were no footsteps there at all, not even the ghost of a name passing by, nothing. And then, something strange, a sudden chill in the air, like a whisper had passed just behind his shoulder. He looked up, heart pausing, but saw no one. When he glanced back down, the map had changed. At first, it seemed subtle. The faint footprints had stopped moving in several corridors. Dots that had been walking just a moment ago were now paused, completely still. Some blinked away, vanishing from the parchment like snuffed candlelight. Harry blinked, rubbed his eyes, and leaned closer. No way. The dot that had been Neville in the library, gone. The two little ones in the Hufflepuff corridor faded out, and then an entire section of the map started to go pale, as if the ink was draining from the parchment. Floor by floor, the outline of Hogwarts itself began to gently dissolve. The detailed little stairwells, shifting classrooms, and creaky hallways growing faint and transparent. Harry's breath caught in his throat. "Show me Remus Lupin," he whispered, hoping for an anchor, something the map always responded to. Nothing. He tapped it with his wand and whispered, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." The ink did not return. Instead, faint lines began reappearing, but not where they should have been. Strange symbols slowly unfolded across the center of the parchment, curling like vines. They didn't belong to any section of Hogwarts he had ever seen, not in all his time at school. The lines didn't follow the castle's known shape at all. Instead, they formed an odd, looping spiral that pulsed with a soft, sleepy glow, like moonlight bouncing off mist. Harry sat back, stunned. This wasn't just a trick of tired eyes. The Marauder's map was showing something else entirely, something secret, something hidden. He reached for his wand again, whispering, "Lumos," and watched as the gentle light revealed more of the symbols on the map's surface. A single word began to emerge in faint, curving text, words written in the same looping hand he recognized from the original Marauder's notes. "When shadows do not walk, begin to listen." What did that mean? A breeze rustled through the common room, though no window was open. The flames dimmed again, and the room felt heavier somehow. Not frightening, just expectant. As if Hogwarts itself was waiting for Harry to ask the right question, he turned the map slightly, tilting his head, and tried again. "Show me Hogwarts." The map didn't respond. Instead, it pulsed softly, and then, like ripples over still water, it showed a room, one that did not exist on any known floor. It was circular, with tall bookshelves that curved along its walls, and a domed ceiling that glowed with soft blue light. In the center, a chair, empty, facing outward, and then that too disappeared. The map fell still. Just parchment once more. Harry sat frozen. Whatever had just happened, whatever secret had been shown, it was no longer within reach. The magic of the Marauder's map so familiar and mischievous, had momentarily shifted into something older, sleepier, and perhaps deeper. He folded the map slowly, holding it in both hands. Was this a dream? Had he dozed off without realizing? But the wand light still glowed, the fire still crackled, the air still whispered that something ancient had stirred. He made his way up the stairs toward the dormitory, one hand trailing the worn stone railing, the other gripping the map a little tighter. There was no fear in his chest, only the sensation that something had nudged him gently out of routine, like a soft, magical breath brushing aside a curtain. As he lay down under his blanket and placed the map on the bedside table, the stars outside peeked in through the tower's high windows. Hogwarts was quiet once more, but Harry knew, he knew, that the map had told a truth hidden behind stillness, that sometimes, when nothing shows, something is trying to speak. And so, as the rain continued tapping the windows and the castle's ancient stones settled into sleep, the marauder's map remained beside him, closed, silent, but not quite still. Tomorrow, he would ask Hermione, but tonight, the magic had been just for him. A sleepy trick, one that whispered that even the cleverest maps can dream. The morning sun crept gently through the tall windows of the Gryffindor Tower, spilling golden light across the wooden floors and velvet curtains. Birds sang softly outside, and the castle, in its usual sleepy rhythm, began to stir. But Harry lay quietly in bed, eyes already open, staring at the map on his bedside table. It hadn't moved. The moment from the night before still clung to his memory. Faint symbols, the pulsing spiral, the soft line. When shadows do not walk, begin to listen. It had been so clear then, so vivid, but now, the marauder's map looked like it always had, ordinary, unassuming, and quiet. Hermione and Ron were already downstairs when he finally padded into the common room, the map carefully folded in his hand. Hermione looked up from a thick book on arithmetic theory and immediately narrowed her eyes. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" Harry gave a half smile. "Not really. Something strange happened with the map last night." Ron raised a curious brow. "What? It showed Snape doing the can-can?" "No," Harry said, ignoring the smirk. "It changed. It showed something I've never seen before. Parts of the castle vanished. Footprints stopped moving, and then these symbols appeared, like something else was being revealed." Hermione's expression turned serious. "Show me." Harry spread the map out on the table and tapped it with his wand. "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." The map bloomed to life. Dots, hallways, rooms all appearing as they should. Everything looked normal. Ron leaned in. "So where's the weird stuff?" Harry shook his head. "It's not showing anymore, but there was a room last night, circular, a high ceiling that glowed. I think it was underground. And then this phrase, 'When shadows do not walk, begin to listen.'" Hermione frowned deeply. "That's not from any spell I know of. And if the map is showing something hidden from even its own enchantments, that's advanced magic." They sat in quiet thought for a moment, the map flickering softly in the morning light. "Let's keep it with us today," Hermione finally said. "If it changes again, we'll be ready." Classes passed slowly, the day dragging beneath heavy clouds. As the sun dipped behind the western towers and torches were lit along the corridors, the three friends found themselves walking back toward Gryffindor Tower after dinner when Harry felt it again. A faint chill, just like before. He stopped suddenly. Wait, look, the Marauder's map, which he had been carrying in his pocket, began to pulse faintly. Not glowing exactly, but warm, like the way a pebble feels after lying in the sun too long. He pulled it out, opened it, and gasped. The map was blank again, but this time it didn't slowly dissolve. Instead, ink spilled across the parchment in fast, blooming streaks, forming a staircase, narrow, hidden, leading down from somewhere behind the fourth-floor corridor. Hermione leaned in, eyes wide. That passage isn't on any map I've seen. Because it wasn't there before, Harry whispered. The three of them exchanged a glance. Ron hesitated, but nodded. Let's find it. With cautious steps, they moved swiftly through the now dimming castle, footsteps muffled on the old stone. The fourth floor was unusually quiet. No portraits chatting, no creaks from the floorboards. Just the quiet rustle of their robes and the rhythmic tap of the map pulsing in Harry's hand when they reached the spot indicated. They found nothing. Just a blank stone wall, cracked and ancient. No door, no frame, no mark. But then Hermione tilted her head. Do you hear that? They listened. A soft sound, faint, like a heartbeat. Harry took a step closer and pressed his hand to the wall. It was cool, still, but the map shimmered again, and this time the words appeared. Walk where shadows fail, speak not, only listen. Harry glanced at Hermione. What does that mean? Maybe, she whispered, we need to close our eyes. So they did. The corridor fell silent, and in that stillness, something began to change. A deep hum rose from the wall, not mechanical, not musical, just a low, magical vibration, like old enchantments awakening after centuries of sleep. And then, a shift. When Harry opened his eyes, the wall was gone. In its place, a narrow, arched entrance. Beyond it, a spiraling stone staircase descending into soft golden light. They stood frozen for a moment, breath caught between awe and caution. Shall we? Hermione asked softly. Harry nodded. The steps were ancient, worn smooth by time. As they descended, the air grew cooler, laced with a scent that reminded Harry of old books, candle wax, and something faintly floral, like lavender grown in moonlight. The staircase opened into a round chamber, just like the one from the map. Circular, walls lined with tall bookcases, their contents unreadable from a distance. A high domed ceiling shimmered with soft blue magic, casting a quiet, dreamlike glow over the room, and in the center, a chair. Empty, exactly as he had seen it, but this time there was more. A table beside the chair held a small object, a compass or something like it. Glass dome, brass edges, and inside, a silver needle spinning slowly. They approached carefully. Hermione peered closer. That's a magical locator, but I've never seen one tuned like this. It's pointing. The needle had stopped. It pointed directly at Harry, and then, with no spell spoken, no wand raised, the entire chamber began to glow. Symbols floated up from the stone floor, swirling gently in the air like mist. The bookshelves whispered softly, like turning pages. And above, the ceiling pulsed in slow rhythm, like breath. A voice echoed, soft, not spoken, but felt. He who walks where maps do not dare awakens the listening magic. The words filled their minds, wrapping them in warmth. Harry felt something bloom in his chest. Not fear, not even surprise, but recognition. This room was not just hidden, it was listening. It had been waiting, not for anyone, but for him. The compass on the table spun once more, and then stopped. Behind them, the entrance vanished. They were alone in a room that had existed outside of time, outside of place, part of Hogwarts, and yet not written into its stones. Hermione stepped forward slowly, her hand hovering near the floating runes. "These are spells, but they're not meant to be cast," she whispered. "They're meant to be understood." And Harry, still watching the glowing ceiling, said quietly, "It's not about showing mischief, not like the Marauders used to. It's about knowing when to stop looking and start listening." The map, tucked safely in his pocket, pulsed once more, and for the second time in a single day, it whispered without ink or motion, "You have found what even the founders forgot." The glow dimmed, the chamber settled, the air warmed, and the three of them stood in silence, wrapped in something ancient and kind. They didn't speak on the way back. The passage closed behind them gently, like a dream fading into morning, and when they reached the common room, the map once again showed Hogwarts. But now, in the far corner of the parchment, a new dot, no name, just a symbol, a sleeping eye, watching, not spying, not revealing, simply listening. And for Harry, the Marauder's map would never be the same again. It was no longer just a tool for trickery. It was a doorway into magic that even mischief couldn't explain. The next few days passed in a haze of quiet wonder and whispered questions. Classes continued as usual, with lessons in transfiguration, herbology, and defense against the dark arts. Yet for Harry, Hermione, and Ron, each day felt subtly shifted, like the castle was watching more closely now, listening with invisible ears. The Marauder's map remained in Harry's pocket, no longer simply a map, but something more alive, more aware, and though it no longer glowed or pulsed openly, it occasionally warmed against his chest, as if gently reminding him, "It's still here, I'm still listening." The trio didn't speak much of the hidden chamber. They knew instinctively that it wasn't something to be shared lightly, even with other students or professors. Hogwarts had secrets. Everyone knew that, but this one felt sacred and fragile, like speaking of it too loudly might make it vanish. Hermione, of course, couldn't help but do a bit of research. She began spending her free periods in the restricted section, whispering soft spells under her breath to examine older tomes that even she had once hesitated to open. But no matter how many books she combed through, she found nothing that described a listening chamber, floating runes, or a map that withheld its secrets willingly. "It's not in the records," she told Harry one evening, curling up in her usual armchair near the Gryffindor fire, which either means it was never written about or it was deliberately erased. Ron, seated nearby with a stack of chocolate frog cards, looked up. You mean someone wiped it out? Why? Hermione hesitated. Because some magic is meant to stay hidden, or maybe because some magic is still becoming. That idea sat with them for a long time. That night, as shadows pooled in the corners of the common room and the fire crackled in drowsy rhythm, Harry brought the map out again. He didn't say the incantation. He didn't need to. The parchment unfurled with a soft swish, revealing Hogwarts once more. But tonight, a tiny line blinked faintly behind the third-floor corridor, a corridor long believed to lead only to a tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy trying to teach trolls ballet. It was a spot they all knew too well. But now, something new had appeared. A single dot, no name, just a ripple, as if something beneath the surface of the paper was trying to rise. Hermione leaned over. There's no one on patrol there tonight, she murmured. Let's go. The castle was almost silent as they slipped through its corridors. Only the occasional flutter of a nearby owl or the swaying of a lit torch reminded them that it was real, grounded in stone and time. But the hush was different tonight, heavier, not ominous, but filled with expectation. When they reached the third floor, the corridor was just as they remembered, soft dust hanging in the air, and that ridiculous tapestry fluttering slightly despite the absence of wind. But tonight, the air felt charged. Ron stepped closer to the wall opposite the tapestry and paused. Look, a faint shimmer, a ripple in the stone, as if heat was rising from it. Harry reached forward and gently touched the wall. This time, no stairs appeared, no doorway opened, but something else happened. A soft chime, musical, like wind passing through delicate glass. And then the wall changed, not physically, but visually. The stone deepened in color, revealing an outline, a door that had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. At its center, etched faintly, was a symbol they'd seen in the chamber, the sleeping eye. No spell was needed. The door eased open at the lightest push, revealing a short hallway filled with misty light. They stepped through, cautious and quiet. The hallway led to a room, not as large as the previous chamber, but just as magical. This one held no books, no compass, only a series of floating lights, like tiny moons, hanging motionless in the air. The floor was made of polished, black stone, and their reflections stared back at them with faint smiles, as if enchanted with a subtle echo of their emotions. Harry took a breath. What is this place? Hermione's eyes scanned the room slowly. I think it's memory magic, but not our memories. The moment she said it, the room reacted. The floating lights shimmered. One of them began to descend. It hovered inches from the ground, then softly burst into mist. And suddenly, they were standing in the past. Not physically, but surrounded by vision, like ghosts passing through a dream. They stood in a different version of Hogwarts. The stones were newer, untouched by centuries of footsteps. The air was full of the scent of fresh parchment, burning wood, and old magic. 4 figures walked through the corridor in front of them, tall, robed, familiar in posture. The founders, Hermione whispered, barely audible, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, Salazar Slytherin, but this was not a history book illustration. This was real. The founders were in mid-discussion, their expressions thoughtful and intense. Not everything should be seen, Rowena said, her voice like wind through crystal. Some places must remain quiet, some magic left to sleep. Godric nodded, and yet someone will find it one day. A child with the right heart, Helga murmured. Salazar said nothing, but his eyes, dark and steady, turned directly toward where Harry stood. For a second, Harry felt a chill. Could he see them? But no, this was a memory, a message, not a moment. The vision faded. They were back in the dark room again. The floating moons shimmered gently once more. Ron sat down on the floor, blinking. Did we just see the founders? Hermione didn't answer. She was staring at one of the lights still hanging above. Harry, she said slowly, this isn't just memory. It's a choice. What do you mean? I think the castle is showing us pieces of its past, but also asking us something. The founders weren't just preserving magic, they were hiding it. For someone who listened, not just looked, someone the castle could trust. Harry looked around the room. It didn't feel like a trap or a test. It felt welcoming, like Hogwarts itself had pulled back its curtain and whispered, "Here's what I've saved. Will you care for it?" The next morning, the three friends returned to their normal routines. The castle bustled as usual. Peeves knocked over a suit of armor near the charms corridor, and nearly headless Nick floated cheerfully through breakfast gossip. But for Harry, something had changed. Every hallway now held a question, every staircase a possibility, and as he glanced once again at the Marauder's map, now safely hidden in his satchel, he noticed a new detail in the corner, subtle, almost invisible. A sleeping eye, still, quiet, but now half open. The magic was watching him back. The days that followed moved gently, like the slow turn of golden leaves in an autumn breeze. Hogwarts carried on with its familiar rhythm, classes, chatter, clinking goblets in the great hall. But for Harry, Hermione, and Ron, the castle had changed. It hadn't grown in size, but in meaning. Every shadowed hallway felt like a promise. Every whisper of wind against the windows hinted at deeper stories. The Marauder's map no longer showed strange glitches or vanishing names, but it remained warm, almost comfortingly so, like it was no longer just a magical item, but a companion. It was Hermione who first suggested returning to the Chamber of Lights, not in the rush of mystery, but with a sense of care. "I think we're meant to understand it slowly," she said one evening, parchment and notes scattered around her, not as a puzzle, but as a conversation, one that unfolds in its own time. And so they went again, this time not at midnight, not in haste, but after a long walk beneath the pale blue sky, when the castle felt restful. The hidden door revealed itself again, responding not to spells or cleverness, but to their quiet presence. The chamber welcomed them with the same stillness. The lights hovered as before, soft, unblinking moons caught in a lullaby. Ron stared at the orbs. "Do you think each one holds a different memory?" "Maybe," Hermione said thoughtfully, or maybe they're waiting for the right moment to speak. Harry approached one of the lights. This one pulsed gently, almost in rhythm with his breath. As his hand neared it, the air shimmered, not with a vision of the past, but with a gentle sound. A laugh, a child's laugh, echoing faintly through the room. And then, just like that, it was gone. Not a memory, not a message, a feeling. Harry sat on the floor, knees drawn close, gazing at the orb. I think this place stores more than events. It stores how the castle has felt, like echoes of emotion. Hermione's eyes widened slightly. Sentient architecture, she whispered. The theory that Hogwarts is not just enchanted, but emotionally aware. It listens. It remembers feelings, fear, joy, trust. Ron blinked. So it's like a diary, but of the castle itself. Exactly, she nodded. And the founders must have designed it that way, to protect the soul of the school, not just its stone. The realization sat with them quietly. It explained why the map didn't show certain paths, why names blinked in and out, why the door had appeared not with spells, but with presence. It wasn't about unlocking, it was about aligning. Hogwarts was a being in itself, and like any being, it revealed its heart only to those it trusted. Over the next week, each of them visited the chamber alone, without telling the others. It wasn't planned, it just happened. Ron went first, on a night when he couldn't sleep. He stood in the center of the room and whispered, "I'm not as clever as they are, you know, but I care. I always have." The orb that answered him showed no visions, but glowed warmly, like embers beneath snow. Hermione visited after a long day of study, burdened with more questions than answers. "I've spent my life reading about magic," she murmured, "but this feels like magic is reading me." A light descended, surrounding her in the scent of parchment and lavender, like the comfort of an old library on a rainy day. Harry's visit came last. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply stood in the middle of the floor and let the silence embrace him. The room responded with gentle wind, soft and constant, like someone breathing beside him. No tests, no danger, just understanding. It wasn't until the next morning that the true choice appeared. In the corner of the Marauder's map, a new icon blinked faintly. Not a name, not a dot, a rune. Hermione translated it during breakfast, leaning over her toast and tea. "It means offering." Ron raised a brow. "An offering? What kind?" But the answer didn't come from the map. It came from the chamber itself. Later that evening, when they returned together, a soft pedestal had appeared in the center of the floor. Resting atop it was a folded piece of parchment, aged but untouched by time. On it, a single line of script: "What you give shapes what you find." The three stood silently around the pedestal. Hermione was the first to speak. "It's asking for us to offer something back. Not money or power, something of meaning, and something the castle can keep." Ron frowned. "Like a donation?" Harry shook his head. "Like a piece of ourselves, a memory, a thought, a promise." It felt sacred, so they each offered something. Ron pulled from his pocket a broken chess piece. his first victory in the Gryffindor common room. He placed it on the pedestal without a word. Hermione tore a page from her old homework journal, her very first spell scribbled in nervous handwriting, a memory of beginning, and Harry. Harry removed a small, worn button from his robe. It had belonged to his first Hogwarts uniform, frayed and loose, a piece of his beginning when the castle first took him in. The pedestal shimmered. The room didn't explode with light. It sighed. Warmth spread from the floor to the walls, as if the castle itself had exhaled. Their offerings had been accepted, and in return, a new path revealed itself, this time not on the map, but within them. A sense of knowing. A trust deepened. They hadn't solved a mystery. They had joined it. The quiet inside the library felt warmer now, as if the walls themselves remembered the night's journey and held it gently in their stones. The candles flickered low, their amber glow painting long, lazy shadows over books and parchment. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood at the edge of the study nook where the map had last whispered its silent spell. For a moment, no one moved. Even the air felt still, as if the magic itself was listening. And then it happened. The Marauder's map, resting once more on the wooden table, began to glow, not brightly, but like warm embers coming to life in a hearth. The lines on the map stirred, not the usual footsteps or shifting names, but older symbols, circles within circles, like sleeping spells reawakening. A hush fell over the group. Hermione stepped closer, her breath catching softly. "Harry, look," she whispered. The center of the map, where Hogwarts was always drawn, now shimmered with a soft golden light, and within that glow, something unexpected appeared. Not a location, not a person, but a memory. A memory held inside the very ink of the parchment. It wasn't just any memory. It was the Marauders, the young versions of James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, laughing softly as they enchanted the map for the first time. They were seated in a hidden alcove, the same one where Harry and his friends now stood. James held his wand aloft. Sirius was grinning, and Lupin was carefully inscribing ancient words into a parchment, words of secrecy and protection, not just surveillance. Hermione's voice was barely audible. They weren't just tracking footsteps. They were preserving something, a memory, maybe a warning. The vision wavered gently like a dream, and then Harry's eyes widened. James looked up from the spellcasting and, through the shimmer of the map's magic, seemed to lock eyes with Harry, not with awareness, but with uncanny closeness. It was as though the memory had been saved not just as a spell, but as a gentle message to the future. And then James spoke. His voice was faint, as if heard through a rain-splattered window. "If ever this map shows nothing, it means you are being watched, not by us, but by something older, something that listens." Hermione gasped. Ron took a step back, but Harry remained still. The glow of the memory slowly faded. The map rolled itself closed with a sigh, as though it had shared something sacred and now needed rest. The three friends sat down quietly, letting the silence settle over them. The candles hummed. The breeze from the nearby window had gone still, no longer whispering. It was Ron who finally spoke. "So, the map didn't break. It was hiding." Harry nodded slowly, protecting us, maybe, or showing us when not to trust what we see. Hermione gently picked up the folded map and cradled it in her hands. The Marauders, they didn't just create a map, they left behind a reminder that not all magic is meant to be known at once. Some of it waits until you're ready. Outside, the castle stood quiet. The stars above Hogwarts blinked softly, like watchful eyes in the sky. Inside the library, the air felt thicker with meaning, like the walls had heard an ancient story retold and now stood in reverent quiet. Harry leaned back, his gaze drifting to the high arched ceiling. Funny how sometimes the quietest nights show you the most. They sat there for a while longer, not speaking, just listening to the stillness, letting the weight of the revelation settle like a warm blanket across their thoughts. And somewhere deep in the folds of Hogwarts, beyond the corridors and classrooms, beyond the staircases and common rooms, an old enchantment smiled softly and went back to sleep, waiting for the next time the map would show nothing. The soft rustle of parchment faded into the gentle hum of the sleeping castle. The Marauder's map, once riddled with secrets and strange silences, now rested quietly in Harry's hands, no longer hing anything, no longer playing tricks. The corridor where the confusion began was peaceful again, moonlight gliding across the stone floor like a silvery whisper. Harry stood still for a long moment, the hush of the hour wrapping around him like a cloak. His breath soft and even, he took one final glance at the parchment. Mischief managed, he whispered gently, almost fondly. The ink vanished without resistance this time. No lingering lines, no stubborn shadows, just calm, empty parchment. It was over. With a quiet sigh, Harry tucked the map into his cloak and began walking back toward Gryffindor Tower. Each footstep echoed in perfect rhythm, not with urgency, but with an understanding, the kind that follows a night of quiet mysteries and lessons learned without loud explanations. The castle, vast and ancient, seemed to breathe alongside him. Torches flickered sleepily on the walls, portraits stirred, some nodding in drowsy approval as he passed. As he rounded a familiar bend, he saw Ron waiting for him near the fat lady's portrait, arms crossed and eyes heavy with sleep. "Everything all right now?" Ron murmured, rubbing his eyes. Harry nodded with a small smile. "Yeah, the map's fine. Just needed a little patience." Ron yawned. "Figures. Magic has moods too, I guess." They gave the password, and the portrait swung open with a slow, creaky stretch, like even it wanted to go back to bed. The common room was nearly empty, just the dying embers of the fire, casting lazy golden shadows across the rugs and armchairs. The two friends sat down without speaking, sinking into the soft cushions. The quiet crackle of the fire filled the space between them, not awkward, but restful. Hedwig, perched silently near the window, blinked once and closed her eyes again, satisfied that the night was calm once more. Harry leaned his head back, watching the flicker of flames. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes I think Hogwarts plays along with us, like it knows when we need a puzzle and when we need peace." Ron snorted lightly, As long as it doesn't start asking for homework, I'm fine with that." They both chuckled quietly, their laughter fading into a shared silence that felt good, like the ending of a story that didn't need to be loud to be magical. Up in the dormitory, the beds weighted with warm blankets and the familiar scent of old wood and lavender polish. Harry climbed into his, the map now safely tucked beneath his pillow, not for protection, but as a quiet gesture, a thank you to the parchment that had, in its strange way, reminded him that even magical objects had their odd hours. The wind brushed softly against the castle windows, not howling, just whispering. The sky outside was painted in pale blue and silver, stars blinking like old friends who stayed up just to watch over those who wandered late. As Harry closed his eyes, the dormitory melted into soft darkness. The day's puzzles drifted away, leaving behind only the soft heartbeat of the castle and the promise of another dream-filled night. Somewhere deep in Hogwarts, the map remained silent, but not lost, not broken, just resting. Because even mischief, sometimes, needs a little sleep. The soft breathing of the boys in the dormitory filled the warm, wooden room like a lullaby. Outside, the sky was beginning to pale, the faintest glow of dawn rising behind the hills, spilling hints of light over the quiet castle rooftops. But inside, all was still. No footsteps, no whispers, just the gentle hum of rest. Harry stirred slightly in his bed, eyes closed, the Marauder's map safely nestled beneath his pillow, no longer a mystery, but a reminder. In sleep, his brow was smooth, the tension of earlier worries gently faded. The map hadn't spoken. It hadn't betrayed him. It had simply waited, like all old magic does, for understanding. A faint warmth lingered in the room, as if the map itself had left behind a trace of kindness, something old, watchful, and quietly loyal. It wasn't about tricks or secrets tonight. It was about presence, about being there, even when it seemed invisible, that kind of magic. The curtains swayed gently in the breeze from a high window cracked open just a little, letting in the scent of early morning. Stars blinked their final goodnights. The moon hung low and sleepy, watching the dormitory as though it, too, wanted one last glimpse before slipping away. And in that silence, Hogwarts watched its students, as it always had. Through centuries of laughter, tears, and late-night footsteps, through maps that showed everything, and nights when they showed nothing at all. The castle didn't need to explain its magic. It simply wrapped itself around those within it, like a cloak, like a whisper, like a lullaby only the heart could hear. Down in the common room, the embers in the fireplace faded slowly to silver dust, curling upward like breath. A single book lay open on the table, its pages gently turned by the breeze, until one final flutter left it resting on a page that simply read, "Rest now, all is well." And in that quiet, nothing more was needed. Sleep settled over the castle, and Hogwarts, as always, kept watch.